Welcome to Rome, 80 AD, a city reborn.
From splendor to ruin, time's relentless march.
Witness the grandeur of the Flavian dynasty.
Experience the vibrant heart of ancient Rome.
In the year 80 AD, Rome was the largest city in the known world. A metropolis of perhaps 1 million inhabitants, a figure no other European city would reach again until the 19th century. Carts crossed the cobblestone streets, slaves from every corner of the empire hauled goods from the docks of the Tiber, and senators dressed in white togas made their way through the crowds toward the Forum. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, maps, and ancient engravings to life, shifting perspectives, changing camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artist never could have imagined. The goal is not simply to observe the past, but to step into it, to walk through Rome as it once was, and feel what it must have been like to stand here, in the capital of the world, when everything was new. And if you stick around until the end, we'll compare these same locations to how they look today, to see what time has changed and what still remains. Before we set foot in this imperial Rome, it helps to understand the historical moment unfolding here. Emperor Titus had just ascended to the throne, following the death of his father Vespasian, founder of the Flavian dynasty. It was a time marked by extraordinary contrasts. Only months earlier, Mount Vesuvius had buried Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and pumice, erasing entire cities from the map in a matter of hours. Titus responded with unprecedented generosity, sending funds and rescue teams to the devastated region. But while the south mourned its losses, Rome prepared for a celebration unlike any other. This is the Flavian amphitheater, which the world would later know as the Colosseum. The newly completed structure dominated the city's landscape, a giant of travertine stone rising where the artificial lake of Nero's palace had once existed. Vespasian's decision to drain that lake and return the space to the Roman people had been a deliberate political message, a break from the excesses of the previous tyrant. Now, his son Titus inaugurated the building with 100 days of games that would be etched into collective memory. The poet Martial wrote epigrams celebrating the spectacles he witnessed, leaving us one of the few direct testimonies of those days. More than 9,000 animals were slaughtered during the festivities, according to the historian Cassius Dio. Hippopotamuses, crocodiles, giraffes, lions, and creatures from every corner of the empire paraded before an enthralled audience, some dressed in parodies of famous characters before facing gladiators trained for combat. Walking northwest from the amphitheater, we arrive at the Roman Forum, the political, religious, and commercial heart of the city. By the year 80, the Forum already had centuries of accumulated history, layers of temples, basilicas, and monuments that had been built, destroyed, and rebuilt time and again. The Via Sacra cut through this space, Rome's most important street, along which triumphal processions celebrating military victories would pass. Merchants, moneylenders, lawyers, and politicians mingled here every day, negotiating contracts, debating laws, and closing deals that affected territories from Britain to Syria. The temples of Saturn, Vesta, and Castor and Pollux flanked the plaza, their marble columns gleaming under the Mediterranean sun. Not far from the Colosseum, on the slopes of the Oppian Hill, Titus had also completed the baths bearing his name, inaugurated the same year as the amphitheater. These public baths represented one of the first great imperial-style thermae, built partially over the remains of Nero's Golden House. The intention was clear. Where the tyrant had appropriated space for his private pleasure, the Flavians returned it to public use. The baths were not simply places for bathing. They were social centers where Romans of all classes spent their afternoons, moving from the Caldarium to the Frigidarium, conversing about politics, closing business deals, exercising in the adjacent gymnasiums. Women and men sometimes shared these spaces, though the practice varied depending on the era and the preferences of the reigning emperor. The water feeding these baths and the countless fountains of the city arrived through the aqueducts, perhaps the most impressive engineering achievement of the Roman world. By this time, Rome had several of these monumental conduits, some extending for nearly 100 kilometers from mountain springs to the city's cisterns. Pliny the Elder, who would die during the eruption of Vesuvius, had described these aqueducts as marvels unequaled in the known universe. And he was right. No other civilization would build comparable water supply systems until the 19th century. Water flowed by gravity through conduits of stone, brick, and lead, feeding public baths, latrines, ornamental fountains, and the homes of the wealthiest citizens. Let us now imagine the streets of Rome at dawn. Emperor Julius Caesar had banned cart traffic during the day to reduce congestion, so most commercial deliveries occurred at night. This meant that residents of the city center rarely slept well, constantly awakened by the noise of wheels and hooves striking the pavement, by arguments between coachmen, and by the clatter of goods being loaded and unloaded. At sunrise, the streets filled with pedestrians, street vendors, children running to school, slaves carrying water from public fountains. Taverns opened their counters toward the street, offering wine diluted with water and simple meals to those who had no kitchen in their apartments, and most did not. The great mass of Romans lived in insulae, multi-story apartment buildings where cooking with open fire was forbidden due to the risk of fire. The temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus crowned the Capitoline Hill, the most important temple in the capital, dedicated to the triad of deities who presided over Rome's destiny. This building had been destroyed and rebuilt several times over the centuries, and Vespasian had restored it after the fire that devastated it during the civil wars of the year 69. From this height, one could contemplate the entire expanse of the city, the terracotta rooftops stretching toward the horizon, interrupted by temple columns and the imposing masses of public buildings. Rome was not beautiful in the conventional sense. It was chaotic, noisy, foul-smelling in the poorer neighborhoods, but it was also the center of the world, the place where the fate of millions of people was decided. Titus's reign, however, was destined to be brief and marked by catastrophe. While visiting the regions affected by Vesuvius, a fire broke out in Rome that burned for 3 days and 3 nights, destroying an area stretching from the Capitol to the Pantheon. The newly restored Temple of Jupiter was once again reduced to ashes, along with the baths of Agrippa, the Diribitorium, and parts of the theater of Pompey. Titus, true to his reputation for generosity, donated personal funds for reconstruction and stripped his own residence of decorations to distribute them among the damaged public buildings. A plague followed the fire, though ancient historians did not record its nature or the number of victims. Now, I want to bring you into the present and show how these places look today. Thanks for being here. And if you have suggestions or ideas for future cities, share them in the comments. Let's get into it. The Colosseum remains the most recognizable symbol of imperial Rome, though profoundly transformed by the centuries. Earthquakes, particularly the one in the year 847, brought down much of the southern side. During the Middle Ages, the building was used as a quarry, its stones torn away to construct palaces and churches, including the new St. Peter's Basilica. What we see today is essentially the original interior wall, exposed after the exterior was dismantled. Still, more than 4.5 million visitors walk through its corridors each year, trying to imagine the spectacles witnessed by Romans nearly 2 millennia ago. The Roman Forum now lies as a field of ruins between the Capitoline and Palatine Hills. For centuries, the area was known as Campo Vaccino, the cowfield, where livestock grazed among toppled columns and temples buried under meters of debris. Systematic excavations did not begin until the 19th century, revealing layer upon layer of superimposed history. Today, little more than 50 columns remain standing from the thousands that once defined this space. The Arch of Titus, built after the emperor's death to commemorate his victory over Jerusalem, still dominates the eastern end of the Forum. Its reliefs showing the spoils of the temple, including the 7-branched candelabrum that became a symbol of the Jewish people. The Baths of Titus have almost entirely disappeared, though fragments of their structures can still be seen in Oppian Hill Park behind the Colosseum. They were partially covered by the Baths of Trajan, built a few decades later, and both fell into disuse when the Goths cut the aqueducts in the 6th century. What remains barely suggests the original scale of the complex. Andrea Palladio's drawings from the 16th century show far more than survives today. The Roman aqueducts, on the other hand, demonstrated extraordinary durability. The Aqua Virgo, built in the year 19 BC under Agrippa, still feeds the Trevi fountain in the heart of modern Rome. Others were restored during the Renaissance and remain partially functional. The monumental arches that once crossed the Roman countryside, though no longer carrying water, rise as silent reminders of what this civilization was capable of building. Rome today is a city of nearly 3 million inhabitants, spread far beyond the limits of the ancient Aurelian walls. Modern traffic roars where ox-drawn carts once passed. Tourists from around the world crowd before monuments that were built to impress the subjects of an empire stretching from Scotland to the Euphrates. But on quiet evenings, when the crowds disperse and the sunset light bathes the ancient stones, it is still possible to feel something of what it must have been like to walk these streets when Rome was truly eternal. I do really appreciate you watching. Your ideas, input, and suggestions really do shape what comes next. Feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.